Welcome to Conversations with Kat, the podcast. I'm your host, Kat Teller, bringing you insightful conversations, meditations, and guided relaxations, making health and wellness accessible to you wherever you are. Please give a warm welcome to our guest today, Susan Raphael.
So first off, Susan, thank you so much for agreeing to come on and be a guest here today on the podcast. I'm delighted to get to spend time with you and for us to just chat more and to learn more about you. So first off, thank you so much. I always love to start the conversation just by offering you the opportunity to introduce yourself. So maybe if you could share with our listeners a little bit about you and just a general introduction.
Okay, well, thanks, Kat, for having me. I'm very excited to be here and to spend time with you as well. So, I guess I'm going to start with, my name is Susan Raphael, and I'm a woman in long-term recovery from ... so many different things, primarily alcohol and drug use disorders, eating disorders, lots of other concurrent things along the way. And I just celebrated 24 years I call it my recovery-versary. And so we'll start there. And what I like to do and how I spend my time is I work with people on their path to recovery. So primarily teenagers, young adults, which I kind of categorize up to about the age of 30. And often I work with their parents, either simultaneous in kind of a family system model, or I coach parents on working and supporting their young people in the recovery process for mental health and addictions.
Amazing. And congratulations on that huge milestone. That is so inspiring. Wow.
Thank you.
That's amazing. To give people just a little bit of context and background. So Susan and I have crossed paths over the years and have worked together. And I always was really just drawn to your energy. I find you're such a warm and open and kind person. And so I've kind of, I've followed your work and over the years and just have felt very inspired by everything that you do and inspired by just your recovery and somebody who is in long-term recovery. So maybe before we go into the work that you do, I'd love to hear more about your own story of recovery.
Wow. Well, it's a long story of use and abuse and then the happy ending, right? Which I've been able to turn into a wonderful world of work for myself. So I grew up in Toronto in Don Mills suburb, pretty normal family, middle class kind of situation. And despite that, always felt that apartness and not like relationships with others didn't come super easily. I preferred to spend time alone. I preferred to spend time on my own. And I found it stressful to kind of be anxiety provoking to be around others. So that was just a difference. And the significant thing that happened in our family was our mother passed away when she was relatively very young. Now, the older I get, I realize truly how young she was. And we were 3 adolescent girls left without a mom. And that really did change the fabric of the family. My dad was there and always present and working hard. And so I was 13 years old when my mom passed. And I was desperately trying to find my people and find my way and didn't know how to communicate the deep, cavernous, traumatic loss that I was experiencing. And I internalized everything. That resulted in misdiagnosis and finally a diagnosis of Crohn's disease, which really, I guess, was my first disorder. when I was 14, and I had emergency surgery and I missed my graduation. So, more things that were kind of making me feel not a part of and very different. Well, I was desperately trying to be normal and cover things up that were different. It was all just kind of catching up with me. So after that, in later adolescence, I developed an eating disorder, got very focused on creating my own rules and policies and rigid structures that weren't really based on much except maybe a way that I use, essentially using my body to emotionally regulate, which is quite brilliant. And I always validate my clients when they are using their bodies to regulate their emotions. It mixed in with wanting to be thin, wanting to be attractive, wanting to fit into a certain size, and all of that kind of social pressure that young people feel in this our very materialistic world. So that was well before drinking started. And when drinking and mixing in drugs started in kind of normal 16-year-old, 17-year-old behavior, I was out of control from the get-go. There was an absolute loss of control. And at the same time, it was always coupled with a covering up and a denial. There's no problem. I got to figure out how to do this right. So there was never any thinking like, this is causing you some problems, Sue. Maybe you should not drink when you go out. No, it was like all about trying to figure out how to master it. And if we know anything about addiction, it's that addiction always wins out and is the great remover of everything. And so fast forwarding almost another 15 years, addiction really removed everything that meant anything in my life. I had moved out to Vancouver, and kind of a geographic cure, something we talk about where wherever we go, there we are. I was still in this mixture of addiction and mental health challenges, and the addictions were causing trauma, and then I was not dealing with the trauma, and it was just this never-ending cycle. So I did end up homeless and in shelters in the Vancouver area after a really fun, brief career in the film industry, which was very exciting. I loved Vancouver and I loved the film industry and but I wasn't able to manage anything. So things would just rapidly fall apart. Relationships would fall apart. Jobs would be lost. And yeah, so I mean, that takes us to kind of my physical bottom, if you will. And then I bounced for a long time. I kind of bounced on the bottom, but I didn't, I was able to bootstrap my way up with family support and finally get into recovery and learn about what recovery was, learn that I was a sick person and not a bad or a dumb or a stupid person. When I was homeless, I had a graduate education already. And I couldn't sort of fill this gap. I couldn't understand this gap between who I was supposed to become and who I had become. And that created more tension and kind of angst that I was living with. So that kind of brings me into how I got into recovery. And the rest has been quite a life beyond my wildest dreams. And I have to keep dreaming more dreams because I keep kind of doing the things and then having to do more things and having to do more things to keep growing and to keep expanding.
Wow, that's amazing. And curious to know, like, was it when you came into recovery, was that a personal choice and decision, or like, was that maybe family that were encouraging you to get some help and support, or?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And it's one of the questions that I get asked most from my clients. What did it take? What was it? What was that final kind of decision? And it really wasn't that. I had a moment of clarity that was more related to the abusive situation I was in with a partner, with a boyfriend. I didn't ever really have a moment of clarity with drinking because I don't think I ever really wanted to stop. It was always about trying to manage it. It's just that the situation around me, the consequences were starting to become too great. and family was starting to step away in their attempt to take care of themselves, really. And the system of enabling was going to be disappearing. And I couldn't articulate it, but I could understand that I am really going to be homeless again if I don't do something. So I ended up in detox. We called them detoxes back then, withdrawal management center. And I was introduced to the idea of treatment. So I thought I'll go along with this, but I never really had that desire. So I guess that just illustrates that we never know when the path of recovery is going to open up in front of us. So to just keep one step, putting one step in front of the other was helpful for me to get to a point where it was like I could clearly be removed from alcohol and think clearly and make the next right decision, because everything before that had been so based on I needed to drink. I'd had alcoholic seizures. I couldn't stand the feeling of withdrawal, the anxiety, and the depression, and everything was too great that I would just keep picking up. I didn't know how to not take a drink a day at a time, and that's what I learned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one day at a time, day by day. And
Oh,
like you
yeah.
said, you've really built a beautiful life for yourself, right? And like you said before, just needing to continue or being open to continuing to dream, right? And to
Yes.
seeing kind of what
Yes.
else is open in there. It's so amazing. Wow. So I'm curious to know, how did you get into your work now as an addictions
Mhm.
counselor? Like, how did that unfold for you?
Well, I was 6 months sober, and I was working for my sister had a company, and I was working there, and I thought I'd really like to use my psychology degree because I had had a graduate education in psychology, and I'd always wanted to be a counselor. I was always a good listener. I was a bartender when I wasn't a good listener as a friend. And so I always sort of saw myself wanting to be a counselor. So I thought maybe I could revisit the treatment center that I went to and see if I could volunteer, at the very least, have an informational session with them. So that was Renaissance Treatment Center, a 12-step treatment center, and they treat co-occurring mental health issues currently as well. And I went there and I had an informational interview, and I wasn't intending to apply for a job, but an opportunity presented itself. So they offered me a job. I think it was a few days later. And I was just flabbergasted. I thought, this is incredible. So I had the opportunity to work within the women's treatment center with the very counselors that had helped me get into my recovery. Just across the hallway, I was working in administration for the head office. And it was a wonderful place to be for my first months and years of my own recovery, surrounded by people who were also in recovery and doing work that was aligned with what I'd always wanted to do, which was sort of help and support people in changing and being their best selves. So that's how I got into it. And I just started taking courses every opportunity I had. I didn't know what I was doing them towards. I didn't necessarily know what I was going to do with a certification, but I just kept taking the courses, and most of them were offered through Renaissance or other. As you know, when you're in the profession, there's opportunities to have trainings and learn things. So I was a sponge for picking things up and also getting very involved with the activities at Renaissance as an alumni, and then volunteering on various committees in different capacities. So that's how I ended up eventually getting certified to be an addictions counselor. And I came back to it and decided to try to start working in the profession in that capacity. I started working at Renaissance as a in the women's treatment center as well, part-time. Some of the shifts that they would have as soon as I was kind of eligible and met the abstinence requirements to be a counselor. So it just unfolded in front of me.
Amazing. And now you have a private practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when did you kind of shift to just having your own private practice?
After my time at Renaissance, I worked for an outpatient practice, recovery counseling services for over 10 years. And I learned a lot. That's where I fell in love with working with young people. And it's really ironic because I spent my youth all my friends were always older than me. I always hung out with people older than me. And here I was an adult and I'm hanging out with teenagers. It's like I just loved their energy and their zest for recovery. And young people in recovery is just such an amazing energy to experience. So after that, I decided I always had a few private practice clients on the side, and I just decided to take my show on the road and try to do it on my own. And that's what I did. I've always had more work than I can handle, and that's a beautiful thing. So I decided to work from home, and we just lost our golden retriever, but we had a beautiful Buster who was our therapy dog, and I worked from home, and my clients became kind of an extension, appropriately with appropriate boundaries of my family in some respects. So they were really part of my community, and we have shared recovery communities. So it's always one of those things that you tether carefully when you're in recovery and your clients are also in recovery, and I learned a lot about safe boundaries and healthy limits and around that in terms of professional versus personal versus, it can get complicated, but it's also a very beautiful thing to have this recovery community that we're a part of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I find that, it offers, because I get the question too, sometimes, clients will be like, "Are you in recovery?" Like, and I'm also very open to sharing that, and like it's not something I hide or anything like that. I also feel it's important that I don't want to take away from their experience, and in the sense of
Mhm.
like I want them to find their way and their path and their tools, but all to say is that the response is typically like, "Oh, wow, that's so nice that you can connect and understand and relate."
Mhm.
So there is
Absolutely.
that shared understanding, and I find it tends to be very supportive for the clients.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I've always felt that it gave me credibility that I had walked the same or a similar path, and to also always articulate that there are many, many paths to recovery, and I chose abstinence, and that's not necessarily for everyone, and appreciating that, and never putting my approach as the be all and end all, that everyone
Hmm.
can find their own experience.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Amazing. How would you describe, like, so in your practice, you mentioned that you typically work with youth, young adults. How would you describe your practice and the modalities that you use?
mhm.
Like, what would a session look like with Susan?
Sessions with Susan. I do a lot of listening, reflective listening, validating, and empathizing, and really listening to what my clients' solutions are. And motivational interviewing has probably become the foremost modality that I use in asking open-ended questions. Often with teens, there can be resistance. Usually that is something that diminishes over time. And in motivational interviewing, we roll with that resistance. We don't come up and combatively against it. So there's a lot of empathizing, validating, and really understanding where they're coming from. Dialectical behavioral therapy, walking that middle path, and really, again, understanding where the client's coming from prior to jumping into some form of a change process, uh, has has been very effective. And again, I've learned through trial and error. You learn through meeting your client's resistance and having them respond, maybe not in a effective way for themselves or for the session. You learn to where to back off and where to kind of re-enter, through lots and lots of trial and error, and client feedback as well. That they'll tell you, I don't want to do that. It doesn't gel with me, and so they'll try it their way, and I'll support them in trying it their way. So it's like very agenda-less in a sense, and very neutral as a counselor. and a lot of really like, let's figure this out together. I'll walk with you. What's your responsibility and what's my responsibility, and it's never about fixing them. It's about supporting them in their journey to understand and come to who they want to become, and what's best for them. Which is always challenging to navigate when you've got parents in the background who are generally paying for the sessions, because I'm in a fee for service structure. So there's a lot of resistance meeting and neutralizing and kind of walking this middle path where everyone can respect everyone else's journey, and that we're not always moving towards a goal or an outcome, that sometimes the support in and of itself is the solution, and that it's not in the form of they're going to graduate and they're going to go off to university, that the client gets to define their terms of happiness and success, if that makes sense.
100%. I love that. It sounds very, very client-centered and extremely compassionate. And I very much work the same way also. And it's interesting you're bringing up with, especially because of, working with younger folks, how typically, yeah, there's the parent involvement, right? And how do you navigate? And I've had that too, where it's like, how do you navigate like parents' goal and treatment goals and the client's treatment goals, right? Which oftentimes they're not the same. Right?
Exactly. So honoring, I've learned, again, sort of the hard way, to really honor and value the parents' experience, and that they're not the bad guy, they're not the enemy, and it's not their fault. Like, really honoring that it's not their fault. They can't, the Al-Anon tenants, they can't control it, cure it, and they didn't cause it. And to work together with them with their guilt and their shame and their remorse about having a young person who's struggling. That I was working with a parent the other day, and they said, I had one child and they had a health issue, and I was the hero, and everyone brought lasagnas and casseroles. And then I had two kids that were struggling with mental health and addictions, and I was the pariah, and no one wanted me anywhere. They didn't want us in the school groups. They didn't want us in the play dates, and it was a completely different. No one was bringing casseroles. So it's a very struggling place to be for parents who have young people that are in. And this day and age, as you know, with the toxic drug supply and so much, there's just so much more than there was when I was a teenager. And I was a mess when I was a teenager. So having been a teen in crisis, I don't have my own kids, but I can help support families in kind of walking through what from that person in recovery, young person in recovery, and young person in defiance. I can identify with those roles and help to guide parents to that there is always hope and there's always a solution. And it might not be packaged exactly the way you thought it might be, yet it's still a solution.
For sure. How do you navigate like a situation where, you get a call from a parent and they are, they're really concerned about their kid, but the kid doesn't want to come and see you, or isn't willing to engage in any counseling or support. How do you handle a situation like that? Because I'm sure it comes up sometimes.
Absolutely. It's almost always the case when there's a call from a parent, or they're being referred to me from an organization that's supporting parents, that the level of motivation is very different for everyone in the system. So I always validate that it's a difficult situation, and we talk about how the parent is taking care of themselves and what they're doing for their own recovery, and what it's like to get onto that journey of their own recovery, and having their own supports and learning the language of recovery. And so some psychoeducation around, okay, well, what are we doing that might be contributing to outcomes that we don't want? So How do we enable recovery and not enable disorder? So we'll have those conversations, and we'll talk about the importance of setting healthy limits and boundaries. And again, we set boundaries for ourselves. We don't set boundaries so that our kid goes to treatment. We don't set boundaries to change another person. And when we do set boundaries and take care of ourselves, other people change. So there's this ripple effect of when my family started to read Codependent No More and go to family support groups, something was shifting with them, and it was having, it was making me very uncomfortable on the one because I wasn't quite ready yet, but it was shifting them, and I could feel that even though I couldn't articulate it. So to really work with parents in terms of everything they do to change themselves, to put their own oxygen mask on first, and that has a great impact on the rest of the family as a whole. And it's a process, right? So it's a process of getting them to the point where they're ready to maybe set some limits that they didn't think that they were ready, or it's redefining loving behavior. Loving behavior is not paying for everything with no questions asked. It's really looking at what we're putting in, and how it might be contributing to outcomes, and then evaluating whether we want to continue with the status quo, or whether they want to maybe look at, oh, okay, well, geez, why am I supporting that? If I don't like the outcome, why am I supporting it? So does that make sense?
That totally makes sense.
It's a big question.
It makes sense, and what's great is that's where there's opportunity for, maybe if their child isn't ready, but there is opportunity for them to, as you're saying, to engage in their recovery process, and to learn how to set the boundaries they need to set, right? And to take care, essentially, to learn how to take care of themselves, that they
Absolutely.
don't necessarily have to wait for that
Right.
person to change. They can begin to have their own change process.
Very good point. Yes, that we've heard in this older tough love models, which some of the people I work with talk about having come from that framework, that we have to wait for someone to hit a bottom, and absolutely not. There's always things that we can do. As I said, there's always hope, and there's always a solution. And learning the language of recovery, the language of mental health and addiction disorders, understanding, naming it helps us to be able to kind of claim where we're at with things. And so a lot can be gained with education and with peer support, talking to other family members and loved ones that have gone through similar situations, because it's not the kind of thing that people talk about over the water cooler and then coming through a pandemic. It's not necessarily something parents were able to talk to other parents about in a normal kind of community environment, right? There's great parent supports out there and loved one supports, just tremendous work being done.
Yeah. So what does the process look like for clients that are seeing you? And this is also, I think, helpful for anybody listening that hasn't ever engaged in counseling before. Like, so if they reach out, right, how does the process work? What does it look like? And maybe how long do you typically see clients, and how often, and all that?
I've always been somebody that texted clients, and I found with teenagers that was very effective. So I'll ideally like to communicate the appointments through the primary client if it's the teen, and set it up. Often it was after schools that I would see clients. Now with the virtual realm, we do everything. We do Zoom calls, we do FaceTime, we do sometimes text support, and sometimes phone calls. Sometimes parents are involved, sometimes they're not. So it's really defined on a client by individual basis. How I have some clients that have been in my life for over 10 years, and not in the sense that they, not in a negative sense, but in a sense that they come back for touchstones when they're going through difficult times. They might come back and see me. I've got their history. I've been a constant support for them. Maybe we've stayed in touch through social media or other realms, and they feel comfortable that maybe they've started to explore substance use again with a different substance, or maybe a behavior that or a relationship is causing them some stress, so they want to come back and process that. for a few sessions or go through that. And so I really find that to be an honor that, I get to be that person that I didn't have when I was a teenager, and to kind of stay with them on their journey. It's not, life is difficult, life is challenging, and we're always going to go through things. So generally, I might work with someone for a few months, and my business is called Sustainable Recovery. I'm all about getting people on their feet in terms of having other supports. We all need to do our own work, and we all need multiple places where we can fill our cup, not just with one person. I don't never want to be that one and only. So I really like to get people with multiple supports and finding their own recovery path, whatever that looks like, whether it's online support, meditations, community support, 12-step support, whatever the solution is that fits for them, so that they have lots of other people to talk to. Does that answer the question? Yeah.
And then would you say, if they're starting off, would you say like weekly sessions are good?
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Build rapport, gain some, get some intake, get some background, build some rapport, build some momentum, set some goals, have a plan, and then kind of, reducing frequency of sessions as needed. I do have some clients I see weekly. They enjoy that touchstone of weekly contact. I may be a primary support for them, despite suggesting that they have other supports. So, but that's more the exception and not the rule. That's my model. And I'm working on reducing my practice somewhat so that I have an opportunity to write. So it's trying to balance my capacity as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, amazing. So, what would you say are your favorite recovery tools, books, supports, like things that you love to kind of share with clients, that you love yourself, that maybe you can share with our
there's always so
listeners?
many.
Yeah.
My very favorite book, and I had it when I first got into recovery, was The Language of Letting Go. It's a daily meditation book by Melody Beattie, and that's always been a favorite of mine. It's always by my bedside table or somewhere handy. It's got beautiful meditations around recovery, and so that's always been a favorite. I love Journey of the Heroic Parent and Dr. Brad Reedy's podcasts as a tool. I often recommend that for parents and family members. They've got at Evoke, they've got probably thousands of podcasts now on all different topics and subject matters. And I really like listening. I'm an audiobook person, so I enjoy podcasts. And I like Insight Timer. I've been using that a lot for various meditations, and they have great courses if you're subscribing. I love doing meditations, guided meditations before bed, in the middle of the day, breath work, exercises. They have everything. They have live yoga classes. So that's an app that I recommend. But there's so many great ones out there, and I've tried a number of them. So it's a matter of finding one and then sticking with it. And I do body work myself. I love yoga. I love Pilates. I love massage. I like getting into the body as a different way of healing than staying in our heads, and talk therapy is very much kind of a cognitive process, and getting into the body and healing what's in the body is a tremendous benefit for me. Not for everyone. Some people don't like that being touched or that kind of modality. Exercise has always been an important part of my recovery too. A gym membership. For me, I require a gym membership. I cannot do it disciplined on my own, which is fine. I work from home, so going to the gym is part of my self-care. Those are just a couple of the tools. I mean, I love reading things. My issue is more having fun and getting out of the kind of working on recovery mode. So that's what I've been working on maybe the last decade of my recovery, is not so much focus on recovery all the time, because it's easy to eat, sleep, and breathe it, which is wonderful. And I need to practice having fun and
Totally.
doing things that are not so intellectual, because I love intensity and I love intellect and I love learning. And there's a whole other pile of things out there to do that don't involve that, you know what I mean?
I totally relate. I hear you on that so much, Susan. Like, I think it's also just when, like, I'll speak for myself, like, just being so deeply, like, passionate about, like, addiction and recovery. And so it's just naturally what I'm drawn to. Like, I've been always naturally drawn to self-help books and, like, personal
Mm-hmm,
development, which is
mm-hmm.
amazing. But as you're saying, yeah, like, finding that time and balance of, like, just letting loose, having fun,
Yeah,
just sparking joy and bringing in some laughter and humor and yeah, other ways, right? To
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. So that doesn't come as naturally to me as being involved in things that I'm passionate about, which tend to be more in the kind of from the neck up type activities. So that's where the body work and the yoga and going on
hmm
retreats and walking on the beach and taking vacations really helps to balance off all of the heady stuff that our work is very challenging, and there's there are very dire consequences. Clients struggle, they pass away at times. There's lots and lots of trauma in our work. So balancing that off with joy and fun and levity is essential as well, and laughter. And not that there isn't lots of laughter in our sessions. There's lots of levity and laughter in our sessions, but I think you understand it. It's always
yeah,
about balance. Still, very much, it's about balance, a day at a time, balance,
hmm
boundaries, and remembering to breathe. So those are like my three B's: balance, boundaries, and remembering to breathe
hmm
through it all.
big time. Yeah, you sort of answered this, but maybe if there's anything else you wanted to share in terms of ways that you like, especially if you had like a really long day or it's been like you've had a really challenging case or client, like what are your ways that are your go-tos to really help nourish and recharge?
Yeah, a lot of it is done in the times as a regular part of my schedule. So that when I have that really tough day, my tendency is to want to just shut down and restore and sleep, or have extra just kind of lying flat listening to a meditation time. But when we're activated or when we're really stimulated, it can be too big of a shift to go into meditation. So at the very least, it'll be shutting down my phone, shutting down the notifications, turning off the computer, and disconnecting a bit so that I can honor the way that I'm feeling. If it's exhausted, if it's sad, if it's processing something difficult that's happened in my work. So, but the day to day, I'm very rigid about my self care, and it has to happen on a daily basis so that I have the bandwidth to be able to manage when the really stressful times come. It's never perfect. There's never a perfect um, formula for kind of balancing, right? You never know which particular client or which particular thing might blow up or cause you crisis. Just like anybody in their world of work, there's stressful times, right? We can't manage it in such a way that we're never going to experience the ups and the downs. It is going to happen. So it's kind of weathering it and taking care of myself every day so that I have a little bit of extra capacity. Now, having said that, I've gone through burnout and taken on too much, and it's taken a long time to get the scale balanced again, rebalanced. But we learn, right? We learn, and we keep growing and keep expanding and enduring and yeah, and collapsing and
Mhm.
asking for help ourselves. I think another I think of it essential for me is clinical supervision. I need, I would always ask a therapist if I'm going to see them, do you have your own therapist? Are you going to see her? Who are you talking to? What's going, because we're not, we absolutely don't have all the answers. So if we're not getting support, then I can't be the best support for somebody else. So having my own clinical supervision, my own therapy, my own, mentors and supports to go to is absolutely essential for me.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and it really is essential. And I love that you emphasized, your the daily self-care, because I I also practice that, and I share this with clients too. What is so helpful about that is that there's this resiliency that you can develop, right, when you're cultivating a daily self-practice, so that it's not just when things hit the fan, but your body, your mind are already kind of used to knowing what to do, or have sort of
Mhm.
those tools integrated within your body and mind, for when you do hit those challenges or those tough days. So I love that you share that it's, yeah, it's daily, it's
Mhm.
daily
Mhm.
time that you take to refuel and to take care of yourself.
It's such a
Yeah.
better way to understand where our limits are, because then, well, boy, when I'm beyond a limit, I'm very clear now when I'm beyond a limit. Whereas it used to be, oh, gee, like last week was super busy and now this week I'm paying for it. Now I almost know immediately when I'm beyond a limit, and then I can, regulate more effectively. When we're uncomfortable, we remember then, oh yeah, something's not right here, because I know what it's like to feel comfortable. I felt comfortable the other day, and today I'm running into friction. I'm not feeling so good. So there's something's out of alignment. So I know much more on the spot, and can kind of spot check it's in terms of what I need. Um, yeah, which that is just something I think time and experience give us. And when we have those regular checkpoints of self-care, they become things that we then need, much like I needed alcohol. Now I need my self-care.
Mm.
Um, and it offers me relief and reward. It provides me what the drugs and the alcohol used to provide me, in a way that's much more sustainable.
Amazing. Do you have any, I'm just thinking, like, if anybody's listening and they're struggling, they're having a hard time, or maybe they've never reached out for help, do you have any words of wisdom or anything that you want to kind of leave our listeners with today?
There is hope, there is a solution, and finding somebody that you could reach out to, somebody that something resonates with you. Um, and there are lots and lots of supports out there, and so many supports online. And it doesn't have to be forced. It's something that gels with each individual, whether it's how someone responded, or how they um, empathized with you, or getting choosing your way to what feels good. Which at first you don't know what that is, because you're so used to feeling not good that you don't know what's going to. And just one step at a time, and keep trying, keep stepping, keep calling, keep reaching out. Something will The universe will answer your call. The laws of the universe are there to support you when you've declared that you need help and want assistance, um, and are not wanting to do it alone anymore.
So well said. Wow. Thank you so, so, so much, Susan. Such a pleasure to just be with you and to hear more about your story and what life looks like now. For people that want to get in touch, what would be the best way if they want to connect with you?
Well, I'm on all the social medias, probably Instagram, sustainable__recovery. That's my handle, and I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn, and Susan Raphael. So that's me.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and we'll put it also in the description, the podcast.
Sure. And I have a website, but I think those are kind of passé now. Everybody's into the social media search.
Yeah.
So thank you, Kat. This has been really fun, and I really enjoyed spending time with you. And I'm very inspired by your podcast and all of your efforts.
Thank you for listening to Conversations with Kat, the podcast. Please stay tuned for more conversations to come. To get in touch and learn more about my offerings, please visit catteller.com.